Jenna Simmons tried to humiliate me at my husband Alex's party right after we shared the news of my pregnancy, but her plan completely backfired. Now, she's not only facing jail time but also dealing with a divorce. I'm Sophia, 29, and I've been happily married to Alex for 7 years. Our marriage is everything I could have hoped for, except for one major drawback: his sister, Emily. Emily seems to thrive on bringing negativity into our lives. Don't get me wrong, there was a time when I genuinely liked Emily. When I first met her, I thought she was kind and caring. Unfortunately, that impression didn't last long. Over time, I realized she's the kind of person who's manipulative, toxic, and incredibly hard to deal with. I spent years carefully avoiding her bad side, fully aware of how much damage she could cause if she decided to target me. When Alex was 17, he briefly dated one of Emily's best friends because she pushed him into it. The relationship didn't last. Alex ended it because he felt forced into it by her. Not long after, Emily tried setting him up with another one of her friends. When he refused, it led to a massive argument. She even ran to their parents, complaining that she wanted him to marry someone she liked. Thankfully, their parents didn't give her demands much weight. When Alex and I met and fell in love, his parents were completely supportive of our relationship. Emily, however, was a different story. From the start, she gave me the cold shoulder. She would constantly bring up Alex's ex-girlfriends in casual conversations, talking about how great they were doing and suggesting he reconnect with them. It was beyond uncomfortable. Even Alex found it strange and started asking her to stop bringing up his past relationships. Instead of backing down, Emily would double down. She'd accuse me of being jealous and even told Alex he shouldn't be with someone as insecure as me. It was exhausting, to say the least. Whenever Alex's parents invited us over for dinner, Emily would make it her mission to bring one of his exes along. She'd claim it was a coincidence, saying she just happened to bump into them and couldn't help but invite them out of politeness. It felt anything but polite. On top of that, Emily constantly stalked my Instagram, even though she doesn't follow me. My account is public, so it was impossible not to notice she was always the first to view my stories. If a guy ever commented on one of my photos, Emily would rush to Alex, complaining that I was posting inappropriate pictures. Alex and I couldn't help but laugh at how ridiculous her accusations were. It was like she was grasping at straws to stir up drama. When Alex and I decided to move in together, Emily tried convincing him to end things with me. She told him I had too many flaws, and that she could easily find him someone better. That comment cut deep. I'd gone out of my way to be kind to her, even when she didn't deserve it. But things only got worse after Alex and I got engaged. At our engagement party, everyone was thrilled for us, except Emily. While others offered hugs and congratulations, she sat quietly in her chair, looking visibly upset. Then, to everyone's surprise, she stood up and left without a word. Later, she called Alex in tears, yelling that it was unfair she had to find out about the engagement along with everyone else. She said she thought she was his closest confidant and deserved to know first. Not long after, Emily sent me a bizarre message that made me cringe. She warned me to be a good wife to Alex, reminding me that she'd always been the only woman in his life. It was borderline creepy. I didn't even dignify her message with a response. I left it on read, knowing that would probably infuriate her even more. From that point on, Emily started outright ignoring me whenever we crossed paths. Still, for reasons I'll never understand, she insisted on being involved in all the wedding preparations. She came to my dress fittings, attended my bridal shower, and offered her input at every turn. And by input, I mean nonstop criticism. She openly trashed every decision I made, even when Alex and his mom called her out on it. But no matter how many times she was confronted, her behavior never changed. One day, while I was discussing centerpiece options with my future mother-in-law, Emily overheard our conversation and couldn't resist chiming in. She mocked my choice, sneering that it was tasteless, and claiming this was exactly why she'd wanted Alex to marry someone better. That was my breaking point. I couldn't keep my cool any longer. I snapped, yelling that I'd had enough of her endless criticisms and jabs. I told her, right then and there, that she was no longer welcome at our wedding. Emily's reaction was almost laughable. She gasped dramatically, like she couldn't believe I'd finally stood up to her. Even Alex's mom was fed up with her antics and backed me completely. Later, Emily called Alex, complaining that I'd humiliated her and demanding that he control me since I was going to be his wife. But Alex wasn't having it. He told her straight up that he supported my decision, and if she didn't apologize, she wouldn't be invited to the wedding at all. Begrudgingly, Emily sent me a lengthy apology, but I couldn't care less. I saw her message, left it on read, and moved on. I was already overwhelmed with wedding preparations and wasn't about to let her drag me into more of her drama. In the end, Emily did come to the wedding, mostly because I didn't want her spreading gossip about us later. But of course, she couldn't just attend like a normal guest. Our wedding theme was all about soft pink hues and pastels, which everyone else followed without issue. But not Emily. She showed up in a black, floor-length gown complete with a veil, looking like she was headed to a funeral. We were stunned. As if that weren't enough, she went around telling guests she was mourning the loss of her brother to another woman. I was mortified. During the reception, Alex noticed how uncomfortable her antics were making me, so he confronted her about it. Naturally, Emily played the victim. She insisted she had every right to wear whatever she wanted and accused me of being too controlling. In the end, Alex's parents, Mary and Paul, had to step in and ask Emily to leave the wedding when she wouldn't stop causing a scene. It was mortifying for me, and from that moment on, I resolved to avoid her altogether. When I gave birth to our son, Nate, I made it clear that Emily wasn't welcome anywhere near him. She tried to argue her way in, but Alex and his parents stood by me. They completely understood why I didn't want her around our baby and respected my decision. A while later, Emily suffered a miscarriage with her then-boyfriend, James, and it was devastating for everyone. Alex and I truly felt for her, especially since we had already been blessed with a child. After her loss, we decided to show some grace and invited her over to spend time with Nate. At first, Emily seemed different. She was surprisingly kind and gentle with our son. For a moment, I even thought she had turned over a new leaf. But that didn't last. Slowly but surely, she reverted to her old ways. She constantly complained about how hard her life was, blaming everyone else for her struggles, whether it was an ex-boss, a former friend, or even fate itself. In her mind, she was never at fault. She played the victim card so often it was like her default mode, always trying to rally sympathy and get people on her side. Eventually, Emily decided to get married. When the invitations went out, Alex and I were left off the list. Alex was stunned. We'd thought things between us had improved. When we asked her about it, Emily came up with a ridiculous excuse. She couldn't invite me because she was afraid I'd try to upstage her on her wedding day. I was floored. I called her, trying to make sense of it, and asked why she would even think that. Her response? She brought up how she had intentionally worn black to my wedding and claimed she was worried I'd do the same to her. Her manipulation was infuriating. I told Alex everything, and he immediately turned to his parents for support. Together, they decided they wouldn't contribute to the wedding expenses or attend the ceremony. When Emily found out, she broke down in tears, blaming me for the entire situation. But Alex didn't let her get away with it. He reminded her that she had openly admitted to her behavior at our wedding, so she had no business pointing fingers at me. Still, Emily tried to justify herself, saying that my wedding was a long time ago, and I should just get over it. After Mary and Paul continued to refuse to fund her wedding, Emily eventually reached out to apologize and ask for my forgiveness. I have to admit, when Emily wants something, she can be incredibly sweet and convincing. I decided to let bygones be bygones and forgave her. I just wanted to move past the drama. Her wedding to James went off without a hitch, and we all attended. Surprisingly, it was a nice event, and everyone seemed to have a good time. But less than 6 months later, Emily showed up at our door, complaining about how her marriage was falling apart. Alex and I agreed to let her stay with us for a few days, during which she spent hours venting about James. The main issue seemed to be their difficulty getting pregnant, and Emily was adamant that all the blame lay with James. I tried talking to her, suggesting a more balanced perspective, but she wouldn't hear it. She was convinced he was entirely at fault. When she wasn't fixated on her marital issues, Emily turned her attention to our lives, often fabricating problems where none existed. For instance, I usually head to the gym in the mornings before work. On days I'm running late, I bring my work clothes along so I can shower at the gym and head straight to the office. Emily had apparently noticed this and started questioning me about it. She'd ask things like why I needed to shower, or why I even bothered going to the gym at all. I didn't think much of it at first and would explain that I liked staying in shape and didn't want to show up to work sweaty. She'd nod, pursing her lips like she was storing away that information for later. Eventually, things settled down between Emily and James, and she moved back in with him. One weekend, Alex and I joined Mary and Paul for lunch at their house. Emily and James were also invited. Since we expected to be there for hours, deep in conversation, we decided to leave Nate at home with a babysitter. He usually gets bored at these grown-up gatherings and prefers to stay home and play. During lunch, Mary started sharing a story about one of her friends who was recently divorced. She explained how her friend's husband had cheated on her, leading to a split where she took half of his assets. Out of nowhere, Emily cut in to ask Alex if he and I had signed a prenup before getting married. The room went silent as we all stopped eating to stare at her. She completely ignored my presence, looking at Alex like I didn't exist, waiting for his answer. Alex, never one to sugarcoat his thoughts, responded directly. He told her that since both of us were financially stable and earning well, we didn't feel the need for a prenup. Emily snorted, then launched into a rant about how there are so many cheaters these days and how Alex could be blindsided at any moment. Her comment hit a nerve. I put down my fork and asked her outright what she was trying to insinuate. That's when Emily dropped her bombshell. She accused me of meeting someone else behind Alex's back, citing the fact that I always carried a change of clothes. She said, as Alex's sister, it was her duty to warn him. I was absolutely floored. Mary and Paul jumped in immediately, tearing into Emily for spreading such ridiculous accusations. They told her to stop meddling in our lives and to mind her own business. But Emily wasn't done. Without a hint of remorse, she doubled down, saying she was just looking out for her brother. Then, as if that wasn't vile enough, she joked about whether Nate was even Alex's son, pointing out that he didn't look exactly like him. I watched Alex's face turn crimson with fury. I've never seen him that angry before. He locked eyes with Emily, his voice cold and cutting. This, he said, is exactly why you're not a mother, because you don't deserve to be one. Your child is better off in heaven than being raised by someone like you. The room went dead silent. Emily's smug demeanor evaporated in an instant, and the weight of Alex's words hung heavy in the air. Emily's jaw dropped, her face frozen in shock. Mary and Paul sat silently, their expressions a mix of discomfort and disbelief, as Alex tore into Emily like I'd never seen before. He called her out for being a shameless troublemaker who tried to ruin everything simply because she couldn't find anything positive in her own life. He didn't hold back, telling her she was nothing more than a loser married to a hard-working man while she spent her days doing absolutely nothing. But he didn't stop there. He accused her of projecting her insecurities onto me and said that instead of worrying about our finances or asking about a prenup, she should focus on her own failing marriage. Emily's face crumpled, and she burst into tears, sobbing uncontrollably. She turned to James, who was sitting beside her, clearly hoping for his support. But he didn't say a word. He just sat there, avoiding her gaze. I was stunned. I'd never seen Alex lose his cool like that. Emily eventually got up from her chair and fled to the bathroom, leaving the table in awkward silence. Alex, still fuming, sat there as Mary came over to soothe him, while I rubbed his hand to help him calm down. He turned to me and apologized for what Emily had said about Nate, and I simply nodded. I understood how infuriating she could be, but her comment about our son had crossed a line. Despite the tension, I felt a wave of relief. After all the years of putting up with Emily's toxic behavior, it was satisfying to see Alex stand up for me so openly. Once he cooled off, Alex apologized to James for the outburst, but pointedly ignored Emily altogether. After lunch, we decided to go back to having zero contact with her. Her constant negativity wasn't just affecting me, it was clearly taking a toll on Alex, too. We blocked her on everything to ensure she couldn't reach out. Later, Mary and Paul spoke to us about the lunch, agreeing that Emily had gone way too far this time. They could see how much she had pushed Alex, a man who was usually so calm, to his breaking point. For a long time after that, we had no contact with Emily, and life felt peaceful again. Then, out of nowhere, I discovered I was pregnant. It was a total surprise, especially since we hadn't been trying, but Alex and I were overjoyed. It felt like a blessing to be welcoming another member into our family. We decided to wait for the perfect moment to share the news and plan to announce it at Alex's upcoming birthday celebration. Mary and Paul had planned a big backyard celebration for Alex's birthday, inviting our close family and friends. It was shaping up to be a wonderful evening, but to our surprise, Emily showed up uninvited. The moment she walked in, Alex and I exchanged shocked glances. Emily approached Alex, throwing her arms around him in a hug and saying how much she'd missed him. She also offered an apology for their last heated argument. Alex, ever the straightforward one, took my hand and told her that the person she owed an apology to was me, given the hurtful accusations she'd made. Emily nodded, turned to me, and apologized. She claimed she'd been attending therapy for the past few months and had come to realize how wrong she was to humiliate me. I didn't buy it for a second, but with so many people around, I chose to just nod and keep the peace. A little while later, Mary and Paul pulled us aside. They assured us they had no idea Emily planned to show up and said they'd ask her to leave if we felt uncomfortable. Since this was Alex's celebration, he didn't want to cause a scene, so we agreed to let it slide. As the party went on, I noticed Emily behaving unusually. She was mingling and laughing with everyone, her attitude a complete 180 from the person we'd known. It was odd to see her acting so cheerful, but since she mentioned therapy, I decided to give her the benefit of the doubt, at least for now. When it was time to cut the cake, Alex gave a touching speech that had me grinning from ear to ear. He talked about how lucky he felt to have me in his life and how grateful he was to be celebrating another year surrounded by love. His words made me blush, and I couldn't help but reflect on how deeply in love we still were after all these years. After the applause and cake cutting, Alex and I stood together, ready to share the big news we'd been holding on to. With huge smiles, Alex and I shared our exciting news. We were expecting a baby. For a moment, the announcement hung in the air, and then everyone burst into cheers. My mom started crying and rushed over to hug me tightly. Mary and Paul were equally emotional, tears streaming down their faces as they congratulated us. The entire room buzzed with joy as people began asking if we'd picked out baby names yet. The only person who didn't share in the excitement was Emily. She just stood there, looking stunned. At first, I thought she might just need a moment to process the news. But then her expression shifted to something colder, and she walked away, visibly annoyed. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of worry. Emily had a way of turning our happiest moments into chaos. Still, I quickly got distracted as more people came over to chat and offer congratulations. When it was time to serve lunch, I got up to help Mary and Paul with the food, but Alex and my parents immediately stopped me. They insisted I stay seated and relax, reminding me that I shouldn't exert myself during the pregnancy. As I sat waiting, Emily approached me with a bright, beaming smile, carrying a plate of food. She made a point of loudly announcing that she wanted to serve me personally because she was so happy about the pregnancy. She handed me the plate, adding that she hoped it would help make up for all the times she'd been rude to me. Her tone was overly sweet, and while it made me a little uneasy, I nodded and thanked her. As I prepared to eat, something on the plate caught my eye. Shrimp. My heart sank. It's no secret in the family that I'm highly allergic to shrimp, and Emily knows this better than anyone. I couldn't believe she'd serve me something so dangerous. Disappointed, I set the plate down and got up to grab food for myself. As I stepped away, James came over to congratulate me on the pregnancy. We exchanged a few friendly words, and then he noticed the plate I'd left behind. When he asked why I wasn't eating, I explained that Emily had accidentally given me shrimp, and because of my allergy, I couldn't eat it. James, ever easygoing, shrugged and said he'd take the plate since he loved shrimp. Relieved, I smiled and let him have it, thinking nothing more of the situation. But within minutes, chaos erupted. James began vomiting violently, clutching his stomach as he struggled to stand. The entire party fell silent, everyone staring in alarm. Alex and Emily rushed to his side as James pointed weakly at the plate and then his throat. Something was clearly very wrong. Before anyone could react, James collapsed onto the ground. The atmosphere at the party spiraled into chaos as gasps and whispers of concern filled the air. Someone quickly called for an ambulance, and James was rushed to the hospital. Emily stood off to the side, sobbing uncontrollably, but her occasional angry glances in my direction didn't go unnoticed. Later, we received a gut-wrenching update. James had been poisoned. My stomach dropped, and I felt like the world around me had stopped. That plate James ate from, it had been meant for me. The horrifying realization struck me like a freight train. Whatever had poisoned James could have easily been meant for me and my unborn baby. Alex, Mary, Paul, and my parents were still in the dark about this chilling detail. As the police arrived to collect the food James had eaten as evidence, I stayed silent. I couldn't bring myself to admit that the plate had been given to me by Emily. Fear and guilt churned inside me. I sat frozen, replaying the events of the afternoon in my mind. My heart pounded at the thought of what might happen if the investigation unearthed the truth. I felt a crushing guilt that James had suffered because I had handed him that plate. At the same time, an icy dread crept in. What if Emily had done this intentionally? What if she was capable of far more than I'd ever imagined? Shaken by the incident, Mary and Paul decided to stay with us that night, too unsettled to return to their own home while everything remained unresolved. Alex and I spent the evening fielding calls from worried family members, all desperate for updates on James and speculating about how he might have been poisoned. That night, sleep eluded me. My mind raced, replaying every detail and agonizing over what I needed to do. I knew I couldn't keep the truth hidden. I had to tell Alex and my in-laws about the plate and Emily's involvement. Then I remembered something critical. Mary and Paul's backyard had security cameras. Those cameras might hold the evidence we needed to uncover what had truly happened. The following evening, I gathered the courage to sit down with Alex, Mary, and Paul during dinner. My hands trembled as I took a deep breath, bracing myself for their reactions. I began recounting the events of the party, explaining how Emily had approached me with the plate of food, how she'd made a point of serving me personally, and how James had taken it from me, unaware of what was on it. As I spoke, I watched their faces shift from shock to disbelief. Mary and Paul exchanged troubled glances, while Alex's expression darkened with anger. I admitted my fears, how Emily's past behavior had already made me suspicious of her, and how I'd hesitated to share this sooner, afraid of what it might mean for me and our unborn child. Mary, always the practical one, suggested we check the security camera footage immediately. Paul nodded in agreement, understanding the gravity of the situation. Alex remained silent, absorbing what I had just revealed, his jaw clenched tightly. Within moments, Mary and Paul accessed the security camera app on their phones. As we reviewed the footage together, the truth was laid bare. The video clearly showed Emily approaching me with the plate of food, then James taking it from me and eating it moments later. The weight of the evidence was undeniable. Alex's anger grew more intense with every passing moment as he processed the malicious intent behind Emily's actions. Mary and Paul sat horrified, struggling to grasp how their own daughter could stoop to such a vile act. The room was heavy with silence as we all tried to make sense of her behavior. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, Mary and Paul decided to hand over the security footage to the police. This was no longer just a family matter. It was a potentially criminal act. Alex supported their decision, though it was clear the betrayal from his sister had shaken him deeply. The police reviewed the footage and quickly brought Emily in for questioning. What shocked everyone even more was that she didn't try to deny the allegations. Instead, she broke down in tears and confessed everything. Through sobs, Emily admitted she had been jealous of me for years. She explained that she resented me for being an outsider who had married her brother, shattering the vision she'd always had of him ending up with one of her best friends. She revealed that the announcement of our pregnancy at Alex's birthday party had sent her jealousy into overdrive. In a moment of twisted desperation, she had mixed a small amount of poison into the shrimp, claiming she only intended to send me to the hospital. She insisted she hadn't anticipated the plate ending up in James's hands. Emily begged for leniency, calling it a mistake driven by her emotions. But the evidence was overwhelming, and her tearful explanations only deepened the gravity of her actions. The police charged Emily with multiple offenses, including food tampering, endangering life, and causing bodily harm. James, who had thankfully recovered, chose to press charges against her. Along with that, he filed for divorce, explaining that while it broke his heart, he couldn't remain married to someone capable of such cruelty. During the trial, Emily's pregnancy was revealed, and she attempted to use her condition to appeal for leniency. However, the judge was unmoved. The evidence, coupled with her confession, left no room for doubt. Emily was convicted and sentenced to prison, leaving the family to deal with the fallout of her actions. In the wake of it all, James has stayed close to us. Alex and I reassured him that he would always be a part of our lives. I've apologized to him countless times for handing him that plate, but he's been nothing but gracious. He told me he didn't hold anything against me, and his kindness moved me to tears. Though the scars of this ordeal remain, our family has started to move forward. Alex and I welcomed a baby girl into our lives, a radiant blessing amidst the darkness we endured. Nate is thrilled to be a big brother, and watching our two children form a bond has brought indescribable joy to our home. Mary and Paul, though deeply hurt by Emily's actions, have been unwavering in their support. They've committed to helping us navigate this new chapter, while my parents have been incredibly protective, urging me to focus on healing emotionally and mentally. With therapy and the love of those around me, I've slowly started to rebuild my trust and sense of security. Emily's absence has brought a much-needed sense of peace to our lives. While what she did will never be forgotten, Alex and I are determined to cherish the love and happiness we've found within our family. James, too, is on his own path to healing, working to overcome the betrayal he experienced. Life, though still challenging, is finally beginning to feel stable again.